Free expression. We hear that phrase all the time, right? It feels like a fundamental right, something we're just entitled to. But what if that whole idea of free is just an illusion? The source material we're digging into today argues that our most cherished rights, well, they actually come with a hidden and sometimes incredibly steep price tag. So that leads us right to the central question. The source we're looking at doesn't just throw this out there, it uses it to really challenge one of our core beliefs. Is free speech really free? I mean, it sounds simple, but according to this analysis, asking that question starts to unravel a really complex and honestly pretty uncomfortable reality. Let's talk about the allure of free. There's something so powerful about that word, isn't there? We're just naturally drawn to the idea that some things, especially these big fundamental rights like expression, are just a given. Like they're a built-in part of the deal in any modern civilized society. And that's the story we're all told. It's the narrative we're sold from day one, right? That our rights are guaranteed, they're written down, they're protected, no strings attached. But the analysis we're diving into today, it argues that this is a huge and maybe even a dangerous misunderstanding. Okay, so this is where our source drops a really provocative idea. It calls this whole belief system a utopian promise. But it doesn't stop there. It goes even further, suggesting that the very idea that essential things should be free is, well, it's actually unnatural. So when this source says utopia, it's not talking about some perfect island paradise. It's talking about a mindset. It's this very specific and, they'd say hypothetical, belief that all our essential rights and needs are just provided to us, with no cost whatsoever. But, as you can probably guess, the source asks us to look a little closer. This is basically its call to action for all of us. It's saying, hey, look past the beautiful, comforting words about your rights and start to really critically examine how the world actually works. All right, so what happens when we do that? What do we find when we look past that beautiful language? Well, according to our source, we find a hidden price tag. The central argument here is that nothing is truly free. Behind every single right, every freedom, there's a cost, and someone, somewhere, is always paying it. And this really breaks down that tale of two realities. On one hand, you have the promise that things we're told are true. On the other, the reality, as the source sees it. We're promised that our rights are guaranteed, but the reality is they have to be earned by cost. We're told we're free to speak our minds, but the reality, speaking out, always has consequences. And this brings us right to the heart of the matter, the central warning of this entire piece, and it's a powerful one. Free speech is not free. And here's what that really means. The source is arguing that the cost isn't always about money. No. The cost can be your reputation. It can be your job. It could be your relationships. And in the most extreme cases, it can be the cost of your own life. Now that is the ultimate price tag. Okay, but it's not just about speech. The analysis uses this same logic for our most basic needs. Things we often talk about as human rights, food, water, shelter. Are any of those free? Of course not, the source argues. You pay for them or you suffer. And that leads to a really powerful question. If these absolute, bare minimum essentials for survival have a cost, why on earth would we think something as powerful as speech would be any different? So that's the big question, right? If this whole idea of free is an illusion, if it's not natural like the source says, then where did it even come from? How did it get so embedded in our heads that it became this powerful core belief? Well, the source has a theory about that. It traces this illusion back to what it calls scripts. And what are scripts? Think of them as the foundational texts of our civilizations, the big, important documents that embed these promises deep, deep into our collective minds. So we're talking about things like holy books that promise divine grace. We're talking about state constitutions that guarantee these inalienable rights, or even just workforce laws that promise us protections. According to this author, these are the documents, the scripts, that build the very foundation of that utopian promise. And this is the crucial part, the mechanism behind it all. These incredibly powerful texts, they take concepts that are super costly in the real world, freedom, justice, security, and they package them up as gifts. They frame them as things that are just handed to us, totally free. And that, the author says, is where the whole illusion comes from. So where does all this leave us? Well, the source concludes by framing this whole thing as a constant, fundamental conflict, a fight with reality. It's basically the dream of what we want to be true versus the hard truth of how the world actually works.
Yeah, the author really frames this as a fight between a dream and reality. This is the struggle right at the heart of the whole analysis. It's that conflict between the dream, the promises written in our scripts, and the cold, hard reality that in the real, practical world, everything, and I mean everything, has a cost.
And it's a struggle that never ends. It's this constant human project, trying to take these impossible, utopian ideas and somehow force them to work in the real world. A world that, according to this source, just isn't built that way.
And so we're left with one last really provocative question to think about. If our most basic beliefs about free rights are really just a utopian dream, and if reality is always pushing back with costs and consequences, then is the very pursuit of a free society a fundamentally unnatural act? Something to chew on.